So to introduce Sophie, Sophie is someone who actually doesn't need any introduction because she is a critically acclaimed author. We know her very well from her work on the ABC, where she's a national medical reporter, and she's featured many times on the 7:30 Report, ABC Radio, online. She's a well-known speaker, writer, and is a wonderful person to help us learn about living with migraine and to host our panel for tonight. We also have three panelists. We have Fiona Jeffrey, who's a ex-representative athlete. She represented Australia in hockey. In ice hockey, we have Rick Morton, who's an author and journalist. You might know some of his work as well. And Jessica Munro, who is a registered nurse and patient advocate. So with that, I will hand over to Sophie to introduce our panelists and begin with the panel. Over to you.
Thank you, Carl, and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. And we've got a great panel discussion tonight. And like Carl said, we want you to be involved as well. So please be thinking about your questions. I'll be asking the panel questions for about half an hour, but we'll leave some time at the end. So please feel free to write your questions in the chat box, and Carl will go through those and we'll pick some to answer at the end. So all three of our guests are patient advocates. We have Fiona Jeffrey, who hosts a podcast called Migraine Magic, and we'll be hearing from her. Rick Morton, he's an award-winning journalist and author, and Jessica Munro, a registered nurse and patient advocate. And I'm going to talk to these three guests who are all, like I am, part of a club that no one wants to be in, chronic migraine. So I will be throwing in my little 2 bobs worth as well. And it's probably a good week for it because I've actually been off for the last few days with a really bad migraine. So I'm certainly in the right headspace to be hosting this. And thank you. These sort of events to show you that, especially if you're having a bad day, that you're not alone, that this is something that a lot of us go through. And we want you to feel supported, and that's really why it's so good to be doing a patient panel as well, because the patients are at the centre of everything that's so important. So I'm going to start just by getting our panelists to talk a little bit about their own experience when they started getting migraines. So we might start with Rick first. Rick, can you just briefly tell the audience, when did you start getting migraines and how long have you had them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I used to get them really badly in primary school. And I don't know whether they're related, but my parents divorced when I was around the age of 7. And it was quite a chaotic and traumatic period in my life. So I remember quite distinctly going around to friends' places for sleepovers, on a Friday night after school, and just being so sick that I had to lay in a dark room and not actually have any fun. And then they kind of went away for a long time. Like at the end of high school and my early 20s, I didn't get them. And they've made a resurgence in the last couple of years, which has been real wonderful for me and everyone else I know.
Okay, and so let's talk to Jessica now. Can you just briefly tell us your experience about the sort of migraines you get and how long you've had them for?
So I started having them back in about late 2016, early 2017. So I was 26 at the time. I have a vestibular migraine, so my symptoms were actually very different. So I started with vertigo, which just continued for about a month and a half straight. And I had about 8 months of different diagnosis before we got to vestibular migraines. And I was very surprised because I didn't think I had any of the sort of symptoms, didn't fit the boxes. But yeah.
Okay, and Fiona, what about you? Tell us, you've got a similar sort of experience to Jessica, but tell us about your experience.
Yeah, I actually get vestibular migraines as well. I started off with migraine attacks as a child. They were more the traditional type of migraine, and then it moved on to, as I hit my teenage years, the menstrual migraines, and then started transitioning more to migraine with aura, but without the headache through my 20s, and then getting some dizziness then, and then kind of mid-30s, the vestibular migraines hit, and yeah, I've had chronic vestibular migraine for about 5 years now.
Wow, it's so interesting how everyone's experience is different. For me, I didn't actually have a migraine until I was probably like in my 40s. So I had, you know, nothing at all, like headaches. I used to get bad headaches, but nothing like a migraine. And it's actually just got worse sort of probably since my mid 40s onwards. So yeah, it's a relatively new phenomenon for me. So, but yeah, it's just interesting how unique everyone's experience is. Let's talk a little bit about what an attack looks like for people. Rick, again, we'll start with you. So give us an example of what does it look like for you? Do you know it's coming on? How does it manifest in terms of symptoms, and how long does it generally last for you?
Yeah, so in the last couple of years, it's actually been, I've noticed the pattern a lot more, I guess, than I used to in my life. So maybe it's because I became an adult and I got busy and suddenly had responsibility. But typically for me, almost to a T, my migraines will start on a Friday morning, which is my deadline for my weekly job is on a Thursday. And it's quite a busy, stressful day. And then almost every week these days, I'll wake up on a Friday with my weekly migraine. And it starts off kind of, I know the pain is there. It's behind my right eye always. And then it just gets progressively worse throughout the day. And usually, I have some respite at night, but usually I'll get them 3 days in a row. So I just wipe myself out basically. And not be able to do anything, which is kind of...
Yeah, and it's, look, as a journalist as well, it's, it's very difficult, and I'm sure we can talk to the other panelists as well, but knowing that sometimes the treatment can wipe you out. So the same for me, I had to take yesterday off because I basically couldn't function properly, I couldn't string 2 words together. So that can be really, sometimes the treatment can be, while it takes the pain away, it comes with a whole lot of other issues as well. And what about Jessica? Let's talk to you about what an attack looks like for you.
So they have progressed and changed constantly since 2016. I would say my biggest symptoms are still dizziness, and the vertigo it's more monthly, but the dizziness attacks are usually daily to an extent. But since 2017, I've also started getting the pain as well. And I usually start with sort of a few hours before, I'll yawn, I'll, get those sort of precursors. Then I'll have the visual aura as well, directly before the pain. So I get a lot of flashing lights. So that's more my pain ones, but my vertigo, like I said, it's usually about once a month now, which is much better than it used to be. And they could last for a few seconds up to quite a few hours. So it's, very variable. And I get a lot of other symptoms as well with that one.
Okay. And Fiona, give us an example of what it looks like for you.
Obviously depends a little bit on what kind of migraine attack I get, but as with Jessica with the vestibular migraine attacks, I'll get a really strong vertigo sensation, so strong that I can't stand up, have to get down on the ground. I'll be instantaneously nauseous. If I can't get medication in time, I'll be vomiting, and my eyes will flicker from side to side, which is I think the first time that happened, it was a bit like, all those movies where people are possessed by demons. So those ones, they're a bit hard to predict. My triggers are screens and things like that. So if I overdose on them, I'm likely to get them. But obviously hormonal migraines, I can predict those, and I can take medication to help out in the lead up. So that...
let's stick with you, and the next question was about triggers. So how do you manage the triggers that you have? Just take us through what they are and how you manage them to limit the impact.
Yeah, so I guess as with a lot of people with vestibular migraine, light and complicated light sources are a big trigger. So screens and artificial lighting and anything that flickers, fluorescent lights, light through the trees, that's a big trigger for me. In terms of screens, the only thing I can do is avoid them or wear my migraine glasses, which I would normally be wearing, but they're very dark, so you wouldn't be able to see me.
I feel like the odd person out not having those glasses. Rick, we better get ourselves a pair.
They're very helpful. So things like that, mostly avoiding the triggers, avoiding the noise, avoiding the heat, avoiding the cold. There's not a lot else that I can do so much.
And Jessica, you've got your glasses on. Is light a big trigger for you as well? And do the glasses make a difference?
Yes, very much so. They are, visual triggers are my biggest triggers. So these glasses have been absolute savior for me because I work in fluorescent lighting. So that in itself was a huge trigger for me, and just going to work was painful. So this particular type of glasses, FL41 is the actual tint. And yeah,
you work as a nurse, you were saying on the, and
yeah.
so you don't have that much control over the environment given that.
And not at all, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we can't really change the lighting. It needs to be bright for a reason, which is good, but not so good for me. But other visual triggers for me are grocery shopping, patterns. So very hectic patterns, whether they're on the floor, on the walls, anything like that. As Fiona said, sort of flickering from when you're driving and there's trees, so then you've got the shade and then so that's a big one as well. But yeah, these glasses make a big difference for that.
Okay, Rick, so you're like me, you don't have the vestibular migraines, but what have you identified as your triggers, and what have you been able to do to manage those?
Yeah, it's kind of, unfortunately, I think my trigger is fun. So like I've got this stupid ability really to compartmentalize my life. And I put all of my brain power, I guess, into work and meeting deadlines and getting it done. And then I just have nothing left over at the end of it. So it's almost like, almost every time the trigger for me has been the alleviation of stress. So it's at the end of that period, and then it's just bam.
So like you just work, so it's like you work to a point and then you've got nothing left, and then the migraine starts and you just...
And I can feel it happening. I mean, I can feel it happening the night before I go to bed after typically Thursday night these days. Feel kind of like the dizziness starts. I've got like a little bit of kind of flickering across my eyes of different patterns and shapes. And I go to bed just knowing almost certainly that I'll wake up and I'll have, nothing going on that day, essentially. So I need to get those glasses. They make you look a little bit like Janis Joplin, so I think they're cool.
Yeah, they're cool. I'm definitely going to get some as well. Definitely going to get some. So, one of the big issues with migraines is also prevention, as well as we'll talk about treatment, but prevention. And we might just go to Fiona first. What's worked for you as prevention, whether that's a medication or any complementary medicines? Take us through what's worked.
Yeah, so I have a whole range of things, obviously, by this stage. I'm on preventative medication. I take acute medication when I feel an attack happening. I have supplements that I take. I do lifestyle things, so I have try to stick to the same sleep routine, try to pace myself through the day, because with chronic migraine I have a lot of fatigue as well. I try doing meditation and yoga for migraine. I follow a pretty strict diet because I have Meniere's disease as well, so no salt, no caffeine, no fun food really. I use things like an ice hat for when things are coming on, and I use a green light that's specifically designed to help calm your brain waves down. So it's really helpful.
And what is I haven't heard of the green light. So what is that? Is that like a device, or is that
Yeah, it's called the Allay lamp, and it was developed by Dr. Rami Burstein from Harvard Medical School, and he did research that showed that green light in a particular wavelength was effective at calming the brain waves and actually alleviating headache and head pain. Wow. So it works just as well for dizziness and vestibular symptoms as well. At least it's been helpful for me, and I've heard from other people as well that it's helped them.
And Jessica, for you, you've got a new combination of medications that seems to be working really well for you. So can you tell the audience about that?
Oh, yes. So after many trials and errors, I'm finally on a combination that has given me the most relief that I've had in the last 4 years, which has been fantastic. So I am on propranolol, gabapentin, and Emgality, which is one of the new injectables, which is, I'm not sure yet as to which one is doing the trick, but I'm just happy that I've finally got the right combination.
And what about you, Rick? Are there things that you can do or that have worked for you to help minimise the attacks, or are you a bit like me, still working that out?
I'm still working it out because, as you can tell, my body's a temple. I imagine this is the case for a lot of people, but over the last 5, 6, 7 years for me in particular, I've had some really long-running mental health battles that have kind of taken priority. And so for all their faults, the migraines have not been my number one concern. And so, I ended up getting cluster headaches actually for the first time, which I'd never heard of. But in 2017, I had a very different type of headache, and I got pain relief for that, but I've not been given any other treatments or ideas. So I'm actually learning a lot tonight. This green light stuff sounds amazing. I think most of the problem is just my brain doesn't stop thinking or overanalyzing things. Never good things and never useful things, unfortunately.
Well, for me, one of the biggest triggers for me, unfortunately, was alcohol and champagne. It's like, the one things you like. So I can't drink really at all anymore. So I know that is something that I can manage as a trigger. Then I've started taking some of the supplements as well, just like the magnesium and the activated vitamin B and things like that. My neurologist actually recommended, which I really thought was great, because she was definitely into prevention rather than just trying to manage it. But yeah, I'll be looking into the green light as well. And for me, and I think this probably sounds similar to you, Rick, being a journalist, that stress is definitely a big factor. And it's difficult to get away from stress when you work in a news type of environment, but it certainly is exacerbating it for me, that's for sure. I've got no doubt.
I feel like anyone who takes their work home with them, whether you're a journalist or not, or particularly for my mum used to get really bad headaches as well, and she was a single mum, so it's harder, I guess, for people who don't have the time to manage it. And mine's by deficiency rather than choice or circumstance, but still there.
Yeah. So you alluded to it, Rick, and we might just stay on that for a minute about the mental health side of things, because obviously living with a chronic condition like migraine is something we all have to manage, the mental health side of things, between living life but also managing the routine that you need to stay well. So we'll stick with Rick and then go to the others. Rick, what do you do to try to manage the mental health side of things and the anxiety that can come as well with knowing that, the unpredictability, I guess, of a condition like migraine?
Yeah, it's kind of, it's frustrating because, in my group of friends, I've kind of got this reputation as being the one who doesn't show up after saying that he will. And sometimes that's for mental health related reasons, but sometimes it's because I've got these migraines that always come for me at the end of the working week. So like a couple of weekends ago, I made a special effort, even though I was in the middle of having this migraine, to try and go to the park with my mates. I ended up just going there and laying on the grass with my hand over my right eye for 2 hours. And I was not fun. In fact, I don't know why I went, except to try and keep up that modicum of, social.
Yeah, it's tricky though, because I know, actually, apart from this current thing I'm going through, the previous time I had it was right on my birthday weekend, and I had things lined up for like the Friday night, the Saturday night, and the Sunday. So, you can't just cancel like 3 days. I just sort of plowed through. But what about you, Fiona? How do you manage the mental health side of things? And are there things that you've done that have helped you get through that side of things?
Yeah, I actually saw a psychologist, well, a couple of different psychologists for a couple of years, and it was pretty regular, a couple of times a week to start off with. I think because I went so quickly downhill from being, really social, really active, integrated, good job, career prospects, into being completely isolated at home and not being able to even access support groups online or anything like that. It was, I got very depressed and I felt very isolated. And so that was really, really helpful for me.
And what about you, Jessica? What has helped you in terms of managing the mental health side of a chronic condition like migraine?
So I'm the same as Fiona. I've also sought out psychologists. They've been very helpful. especially at the beginning. With the vertigo, it was to the extent that I couldn't walk, I couldn't shower myself for the first week, I couldn't do anything independently, and I was mid-20s. So having that sudden change was very, very hard to adjust to. And then having chronic vestibular migraines has been, well, an overall big adjustment in itself. So in particular, I found with vestibular migraines, it's been very helpful having the mindfulness. So I originally had an app downloaded. There was a couple of different ones, but I was using Headspace at one point. But I also saw one of the psychologists specialized in mindfulness as well, and they gave me a few good coping techniques. Yeah, so I think that's probably.
And one thing, there's an app that I've found quite useful that's called Curable, which is a dreadful name, but it's a chronic pain app actually, not specifically for migraine, but they have really good interviews with experts to do with chronic pain, particularly looking at the mind-body connection. So I find that quite helpful. I mean, they have meditations and they have a whole lot of things you can do, but I like the podcast of that because I find the experts they have on that are really good. What are the things that the panel have had to sort of modify in terms of what you've been able to do, like, but also the opportunities, like Jessica, you were saying with your work, there's some things where you haven't been able to do some things in your work as a nurse, but then it's also opened some opportunities like where you might want to take your career. So tell the audience about that.
Yeah, so I can't work night shifts anymore because obviously the disruption to my sleep is a big trigger. I pushed through for about a year and continued to do them, and it just wreaked havoc on myself. Choosing to stop that particular line of work meant that I would have to look at a completely different line of work for nursing. But I also spent a lot of time researching migraine and headaches. And found that there was a lot of lacking support and education out there. And I spoke to a lot of patients, sufferers over the years through the hospitals that were desperate to have access to clinics and education. So I have decided that hopefully down the track, I will be able to work as a headache nurse and actually be able to provide education ongoing.
That's great. That's really good. And we might just, one thing I did want to ask the panel also was about everyone's experience with healthcare professionals. Fiona, you mentioned some good advice when we spoke on the phone about what would your advice be for people in terms of if they've, say, seen one doctor or waiting to see a neurologist? What advice would you have for them based on your experience?
I would say see someone as soon as you can, get in early, because the longer that you wait to see someone who is specialized in headache, the longer you wait, as with Jessica and myself, the longer it takes to get a diagnosis, and particularly with more tricky kinds of migraine or any kind of migraine really, the longer you wait before getting a preventative, if you need one, then the more likely it is to become chronic, and you don't want that to happen. You want to minimize its impact on your life as much as possible.
What about you, Rick? What have you had? What sort of experiences have you had with getting medical help for your migraines, and what advice would you have for the audience?
Look, I've had one good GP. He kind of nailed it right off the bat. And to be quite honest, some pretty horrible run-ins with a whole lot of others. I know there's good people and bad people in every industry, but it's just kind of, it's almost like, and for the long time I convinced myself of this, that migraines are just something that are out there and we just accept it. And I've certainly come across that attitude in the medical community in pockets of it. So, things like having specialized headache nurses and things like that is actually music to my ears, because sometimes you just don't know until you turn up and someone says, oh, it's this. And a world of possibilities opens up. And that's certainly been my experience, coming late to this while I was focusing on mental health stuff, which is a problem. And I suspect they're interrelated to some degree.
And so are you doing anything in terms of preventative? Are you taking any, like using any of the preventatives like Botox or anything like that some people use, Rick?
You can't tell? No, I'm not. I am a typical man, unfortunately, in the sense that healthcare has always run about 64th in order of things that I do. But it's something that I've been thinking about more recently because they have been peaking, these headaches.
Mm.
Have been more consistent than they've ever been in the last 4 or 5 years. And I read only today, actually, that apparently the resurgence tends to happen in your 30s, and I'm 33. So, I think the time is now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess from talking to the other panelists and certainly my experience, I got a referral to see a neurologist probably about a year ago and just put up with it and didn't do anything. And I finally did see someone, and I'm really glad that I did. So I'll probably, back up the advice to go and see someone sooner rather than later. Like, don't wait, because there are good health professionals out there. And it's just it's a matter about finding the right ones. You might not get the best time the first time, but it's worth persevering to get a good diagnosis as well. Now what's the time? We've got we might go to the audience questions soon, but I guess I wanted just to get also from the panel a bit about your advice for the audience, who might be living with migraine or caring for someone with migraine. So maybe, Fiona, what advice would you have for someone, we've got a lot of people with migraine who are watching right now. What would you say to the audience?
Yeah, I guess one of the hard things to do is to really be patient with the process. It's going to take time. So you're probably going to need to try different medications and try different things. And you need to take a holistic approach to changing different things in your lifestyle probably, and looking at a whole lot of aspects before you start seeing some improvements. And you might not see improvement then, which is deflating, but be patient and be kind to yourself during that process.
And Jessica, what about you? What would you really like the audience to sort of take away from this session? Any advice that you have for them based on your experience?
The best advice I can give, if you're not already, track your migraine. That is one of the single most effective ways that the healthcare team can assist you. It also helps you to identify triggers. And you might not realize how often these things are happening or for how long they're happening. So there's a lot of really good apps out there. Migraine Buddy is a fantastic one, and it's free as well. But yeah, there's lots of different ways you can do it. You can do it with paper.
Yeah, no, I use Migraine Buddy, and I also use the neurologist that I'm seeing gave me a just like a piece of paper. It's very old school, not very high tech. But when I started to track it on the piece of paper, I realized that I was actually getting them a lot more often than I had told her that I realized. So I sort of thought it was maybe once a month or whatever. When I looked at the number of days that I'd circled, it was definitely more than that. And so just that sort of discipline of tracking it has, when I go back and see her for a follow-up, I'll be able to show her and just say, look, it's actually more than I thought. So that's really interesting. And Rick, what about you? What would your advice be to the panel?
Look, I feel like I'm
the audience. Sorry,
I've got no advice for the panel whatsoever.
I'm into the audience.
I'm learning things.
Me too.
I guess, I think the audience, if they're tuning in, they will know this already, but, migraines are not just headaches. And I guess the single biggest factor that I've come up against, I guess, even in my own social group, is why can't you just take some Panadol and get over it? It's not the same thing. Now, I wish it was, I really do. Because it is a process, and in my case, and in many cases, it's days of poor function and then a recovery period, and then you do it all again. So just that little bit modicum of understanding for people who are caring for people who have migraines, parents, and all of that, I think is really important, because that goes a long way. I mean, chronic illness of any kind, I think being relieved is the first step, so that you can actually get treatment and get help.
Yeah. Can I add another quick one?
Sure, jump in, Jessica.
So if you are seeing a specialist, it's recommended if you can bring a close family member with you, or your support system, because it's good for them to learn about your condition as well while you're learning about it. That way they can also understand a little bit further what you're going through.
And so before we move on, we've had a lot of questions on the chat about your glasses, Jessica. So can you just tell us a bit more about those, and can you buy them in Australia, or where did you get yours from?
So these ones are from America. These ones are called Theraspecs. But I know that you can get them in Australia because my second pair, which are here, are my Australian pair. Unfortunately, I find that these aren't quite as good as these ones. But these ones were specifically designed for people with migraines. I think Axon does them as well, but once again, that's an overseas company.
And so did you have to try a few to see which ones were going to work for you, or?
Well, it's the tint in this particular one, and there's actually a study. It is an older study, but there is a study on there that shows that it can be effective for people who have migraines. So not in that sense, no. I looked it up. I did the research. I spoke to my neurologist, who gave me a big thumbs up for it. And then I just purchased the first ones that I found that might fit my face.
And what about, and Fiona, have you tried those glasses? Have you tried something like that?
Yeah, so I've actually tried Theraspecs, Axon Optics, Erling glasses, an Australian F41 tint, and these are the latest ones I'm trialing. I don't know how easy it'll be for people to see, but they're called Migraine, and they have a green lens.
Right.
And I just actually did.
I know it's down now. My typical journalist. Yep.
Well, I just did a podcast episode with the man who created these, and he's actually created the tint based on the research that Dr. Rami Burstein did. So it's based on refining that light down to that specific band of green light. And I've actually found them really helpful in reducing my vertigo and dizziness. The Erlen glasses that I normally wear, they're a bit dirty, but you can see they have, for me, they have a purple tint, but for everyone's different. So you go and get tested and they do different tests, and based on your reaction. I know the FL41 tint, it doesn't take out quite as much of the, I believe it's the blue light. But yeah, like, it's hard. The Axon Optics and the Theraspecs can be a bit pricey to get over here, but if you know someone with them, definitely ask if you can borrow them, give them a try for a little bit, and yeah.
Well, while we're talking to you, Fiona, why don't you tell us a bit about your podcast? We'll give you a podcast, a bit of a shout out for the audience to hear about.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's called Migraine Magic. Cheesy name, but it's all about spreading a little magic to the migraine community. It was just born out of the fact that I felt so isolated and alone when I was going through everything, and I couldn't connect with anyone, and I couldn't access online support groups, and it was really hard to find any information. So I want to share information that will be helpful to people. So if you do want to get in touch, please, contact me at any time. I'm happy to do episodes on things that people are interested in. There's a lot of information up there. I've done several episodes on photosensitivity and the different glasses and things like that too. So if you're interested in that, there's more information there. So yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So, Carl, did we want to take some questions from the audience now, or just having a look through to see?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have a question for the panel, if you have someone in mind, or if it's for the panel in general, please jump in now and put in your questions. I've seen one question come.
Uh-oh, where's Carl gone? I had one, while we've lost Carl there for a minute, I just wondered, there's a few people commenting about smell. Does anyone else on the panel, smell is a big trigger for me. So much so that the kids have to put on certain like deodorants and aftershaves outside the house. I can't have them doing it in the house. Is that a problem for you, Rick, at all?
Well, no, I don't think so. Although taste is starting to become one of the things. Well, certainly,
taste is like certain foods and.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I'm starting to have a reaction to red wine, unfortunately. which is not ideal. But I don't even drink that much anymore. So, and you know, I lost my sense a long time ago. Unfortunately, I smoke and drink too much coffee. So, for me, no.
What about, that's actually, you just mentioned coffee, but I might just ask the panel about caffeine. Do you find caffeine, because I know I don't really drink a lot of coffee, but the other day when I was having like bad migraines, I thought I'll just have a coffee, and the caffeine definitely did help. But I know that it can also be a big issue if you drink coffee, and then you can have the withdrawal headache and migraines as well. So so for you, Jessica, is caffeine an issue for you, either as a way of fixing the migraines, or you've got to be careful how much you have?
I can't drink coffee at all anymore, unfortunately. I started triggering the vertigo
Right.
early on, and I sort of weaned myself down being a nurse. That was very hard.
I don't know how you do it.
It was very, very difficult. No, I can't drink coffee at all. Even if I have 1 cup during the day, it'll send me right off.
Right, okay. And so what about you, Rick, though? You're still okay with some coffee and some caffeine?
Look, I mean, yeah, it doesn't seem to be a trigger for me. I mean, I do drink too much of it. There goes my connection. I do drink too much of it still, and I tend to get, like, I notice the come down from it can be a trigger, or at least it seems to jibe with, kind of that. It's almost like the pressure coming off the brain.
Right.
I feel like it's connected somehow. I don't know. I'm not a medical specialist.
Well, I know for me, because I drink quite a lot of tea, and if I reduce the amount of caffeine I'm having, I definitely will trigger a migraine. So I've got to either keep drinking the same amount of tea every day.
Well, I'm on 3 cups of coffee a day. So
what was that, Rick?
I'm on 3 cups of coffee a day, every day, pretty much.
So you'll probably find, as long as you keep that stable, you'll probably be okay. So Carl, you're back. Have we got any questions from the audience that we wanted to go to in particular?
Did I get out that question that I was?
No. So do you want to give us a run through again?
Yeah. So the question was asking about fatigue and how the panel manages fatigue with their migraine, and how sometimes the fatigue can linger long after the attack is gone. How do you manage that?
Okay. Did you want to start with Rick, and then we'll go to Jessica and then Fiona?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing for me, because like I am tired all the time, and I haven't been able to pinpoint where it comes from. I'm on SSRIs, which don't seem to be as big a problem as they were 5 years ago when I started them. But just having the attack itself is so exhausting and so debilitating. Yeah, and it's hard to describe it unless you've gone through it. But it's like everything else ceases to exist. And mentally that's quite debilitating in its own way, because particularly myself, like I like to be busy, I like to be doing my work, and I say yes to more things than I should, and I like doing that.
You and I are very similar, Rick.
I don't know what in our past explains that, Sophie. I'll speak for myself, not for you. But
no, that's all right. We'll take that offline. We'll have to have a debrief session later.
Yeah. But being tired, it sucks. It sucks.
Okay, and what about, and so Jessica, what's the fatigue like for you?
Well, nursing is very stressful. So coming home from that in itself, I'm tired from that. But even when I off for a period of time, I'm exhausted all the time. Even on my lovely new meds, and I feel better, I'm still getting fatigue. And I know that the stress of having vertigo and things like that do play into my fatigue. Unfortunately, I can't work as often. I haven't worked full time since this started because of the attacks and because of the fatigue. But I have a routine now. And I am also one to push myself. Yeah. I've been told many times that I need to slow down by my partner. But I really struggle because I like to do as much as I can all the time.
I know sometimes we can be our own worst enemies. And Fiona, what about for you? What's the fatigue like, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, just on the smell thing too, I totally get that with the smells. For everyone who suffers from the smells, everything that has any kind of odor triggers me. But yeah, the fatigue. I've had periods where it's been like chronic fatigue, where I couldn't do anything for months, where I couldn't walk to the letterbox. I still now have days where, you know, a lot of times unpacking the dishwasher is too much to do. You know, if I make it around the block with my dog, then I count that as a good day, and that's a win. And I just try to pace myself. I'm trying to use the pacing technique where I measure out each day and try and do a little bit each day. And it's been hard because I've gone from being extremely active. You know, I was on the ice 5 or 6 times a week. I was at the gym nearly 7 days a week, and I've gone to doing almost nothing. But I think I've finally become reconciled to that, and I've realized that doing more isn't going to help me anymore, and actually I can do more if I do less. So it's getting myself to realize that and recognize that, and then, you know, listen to my brain when it tells my heart that.
Yeah. So we've only got a couple of more minutes. Carl, are there any other questions that the audience, burning questions from the audience, or we might just have one last final thoughts from each panel member?
Yeah, I think one of the audience members, Sharon, had a question about how do you get your GP to take you seriously, just so you can get a referral to see someone better.
So to see another GP or to see a neurologist?
Another doctor.
So Fiona, and did you have problems with that, or was because you were quite, you know, you had quite a sort of acute problem in the beginning that they took it pretty seriously?
They took it seriously, but well, in some ways, but I did get fobbed off a couple of times. Oh, it's just because I actually went deaf in my left ear as well with the Meniere's disease, and I got told that, oh, it's an ear infection, it's going to get better, and things like that. I think going armed with, as Jessica said, your migraine diary that has all the symptoms when you've experienced them, things that happen before and after, that's evidence. That's very hard to ignore. So something like that is really good. And also, if you go armed with a list of questions, doctors don't have very much time, but if you go there with your list of, I want this, and this, I'd like an answer to this, and this, and, you know, if you need, I'd also like a referral to a headache specialist or to a neurologist because my worries are this, and this, and then that it's hard for a doctor to ignore that. And if they do ignore you, there are many GPs. So yeah, try and find a different one.
Very good advice. And look, and the thing I would say also is like, and I find this, you know, because I'm a medical journalist, that you're always best to go to someone who that's what they do every day. You know, like if you're going to see a neurologist, find out the one that specializes in migraines or the type of migraine that you have, and they're going to be probably more up to date on the research. They're going to be across all the clinical trials, rather than seeing someone who's more of a generalist. So I definitely do that when I'm looking for an expert for a story. I want to find out who is the person who does this, who knows this backwards. So what about you, Rick? Have you found with doctors, have you been taken seriously or had to sort of fight to get the help that you needed?
Look, it really is a lottery. And the thing that worries me the most is that, you know, sometimes there are doctors that bulk bill and sometimes there are ones who don't. And, you know, particularly with the mental health stuff, but it's the same for the migraine stuff. You know, that journey to find someone who actually can help and who mentions the thing that you need to know, it takes a long time. And, you know, because they're so variable, I think you need to be as consistent as you can to kind of smooth that out and going prepared. Like, I mean, I feel like I've cheated on this panel because I've learned more, I think, than I've people to this conversation. So I'm going to go away and try some of those things now. I can't wait to go through. Yeah.
No, it's been very, very informative. It's been fantastic. And what about you, Jessica? How did you navigate your journey with getting help from healthcare professionals when you first started getting the migraines?
So I'm quite lucky because of my healthcare background. I'm very assertive in my own health, and I'm a big advocate for all my patients as well. So I know when I've got, like, I'm very lucky I have a very good GP, but I've had less good ones in the past. And I've straight away booked myself into another one because, you know, unfortunately, when it comes to migraines and headache, general practitioners and a lot of healthcare providers don't have the education that that we would like them to have on those subjects. So you're going to find a lot out there, unfortunately, especially, I mean, I found this towards women especially. They can be quite dismissive. There's also so many fantastic GPs out there that are willing to do their own research as well, and also send you on, but also provide you with that initial education, which is so important at that GP level. So if you don't have that, it might be a good idea to look into somebody who will be able to provide that.
Yeah.
Or who are willing to look into it and provide you with further education, because that's so important. And unfortunately, urologist wait time is 3-4 months sometimes. So having that initial point of contact is really important.
Yeah, and also, like, I think what I've learned from this discussion and research is also that there are options and choices. So, you know, like when I saw the neurologist, she said, okay, let's do this as plan A. If that doesn't work, then you can go to this plan B. And then if that doesn't work, then this will be the plan. And so just knowing that there are options out there that you could try definitely made me feel like I don't just need to stick with what I'm doing. Just having someone, and I felt like it was a partnership, you know, I was working with her, which was great, which is what you want in healthcare. You know, you want to feel like you're a partnership working together to feel better. So we better wrap up soon, but I just wanted to see if the panelists had last thoughts for the audience. I mean, I'm sure we could keep talking all night, but I'm mindful that we don't want to wear people out. So we'll start with Rick. What are your last thoughts for the audience?
I knew you'd start with me. I mean, I've got to take my own advice, or I've got to take the advice I give other people and you know, take things back to ground zero in a sense, and figure out what the problem is. Be mindful of when you are getting these attacks, and then go and talk to someone about it, which is something I've been putting off for years and years and years, and now I'm feeling quite energized about having this project. So I will dedicate myself to it like I do. I dedicate myself to everything else. So
good on you.
Take it in one step at a time.
Exactly. Okay, and Jessica, what would be your last thoughts for the audience?
Don't settle for having migraines. Get help, because there's lots of help out there. There's lots of educational resources as well through Headache Australia, and there's international ones as well. The American Association is fantastic. But yeah, definitely when you go and see a physician, make sure that you do have that history as much as possible. It's incredibly helpful for them. And if you can, try and leave with a plan, as you were saying. It's so important to have a preventative plan and an acute plan.
Good advice. Fiona, what about you? Just wrapping up.
Yeah, I'm glad you came to me last, because I totally got hit by that brain fog when you went to Rick, and I was like, phew. Yeah, I would just say, remember that you're not alone. It's so easy to feel alone when you're stuck in your room by yourself and you can't see your friends. Know that you're not alone. No matter what kind of weird and crazy symptoms you have, someone out there has exactly the same symptoms. So reach out for support. Reach out on like the Headache Australia Facebook group or other Facebook groups. There are tons of them. Reach out to any of us on the panel here. Anyone we can direct you to. Reach out to Carl. Headache Australia, Migraine and Headache Australia can direct you to different support networks, and you know, you don't have to be alone in this.
Excellent. And I've noticed even just on Instagram as well, I've been going on Instagram a bit more, and there's some really good resources there to do with migraines. And I know that Rick, you're on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle? Squiggly Rick?
Squiggly Rick. I couldn't tell you why.
Squiggly Rick. I love that. It stands out. And Fiona, you're on Twitter and Instagram as well, aren't you?
Yeah. Migraine X Alone. Stands for
Okay.
migraine, you're not alone. So.
What about Jessica? Do you have a Twitter or Instagram you wanted to shout out, or rather?
Not really.
That's right.
I actually don't have.
That's right. You've been a nurse and helping people. And mine is Sophie Scott and the number 2. That's my Instagram and Twitter handle, Sophie Scott 2. So yeah, reach out to anyone on the panel. It's been great sharing this time with you. It's been wonderful. I've learned a lot. And yeah, a big virtual round of applause for Rick, Jessica and Fiona, and for Carl for the Brain Foundation and for organising this fantastic webinar, and Migraine and Headache Australia. There are more webinars this week. Carl, did you want to say a few words to wrap up? But
Yes. No. Thank you to all of our panelists, and to you, Sophie. You did a wonderful job. Please join me, the audience. I can see they're thanking you already for your time. And just before we wrap up tomorrow, we do have 2 more sessions. We have 2 sessions tomorrow. One's at noon with the Deputy Chair of the PBAC, which is the Pharmaceutical Benefits Committee. They decide what treatments are covered on the PBS or not, and we have several new generation CGRP treatments that are in with the PBS for submission. So that's going to be a really interesting talk with Joe Watson. And then at 6 p.m. tomorrow night, we've got Dr. Elizabeth Hutton, who's going to be talking about new treatments. So this is probably going to be a popular talk, given how much talk there was today about treatments and prevention. So that'll be one you don't want to miss. And it's also a good place to ask those medical questions. I know that we didn't get a chance to ask a lot of those medical questions. None of us here are doctors, but you will be able to ask those tomorrow. And our final talk will be on Friday at noon with another clinician, Dr. Michael Eller, who's going to be talking about different headache types such as cluster, which came up tonight, hemicrania continua, new daily persistent headache. So if you're one of those people in the audience today that was saying that they have a constant headache, it could be new daily persistent and it's just been misdiagnosed as migraine. So that's another one you don't want to miss. But for now, thank you so much for your attention. Thank you again to our panel and to our host.
Let me just take a quick photo before we go. Let me just take a quick pic.
A team selfie.
Yeah, so we can put out, do a shout out. Yay! Well done.